and bring peace and democracy to the Middle East. Yet for another group, it is the best thing that could ever happen. You might wonder who could possibly be happy about a situation with such devastating consequences. I don't. The corporations that provide services to the military are making more money in this time than ever before. Troop withdrawal is not in their interest. Perhaps corporations like the Halliburton subsidiary Kellogg Brown & Root, otherwise known as KBR, are using the green zone in Iraq as a prototype for how they would like to eventually privatize and control America. Think about it. In Iraq, if KBR and other corporations pulled out, the military would be in great danger, a testament to how the greatest fighting force in the world has been reconfigured, crippled, I say, to merely being the small fish underneath the chin of the no-bid deal corporate shark. It's working great in Iraq. Why not bring that overpriced roadshow here to America and treat the citizens to a little of that privatized efficiency? Privatize water supplies to always ensure that the right people will never be thirsty. Privatize education, and then only the people who can really benefit from it will get the information they need from the best teachers available and be able to make the best choices for all the rest. Privatize the military, turn the entire shooting match into a mercenary outfit that stabilizes the unstable and neutralizes any motherfucker with a problem or a question. Imagine having to call 1-800-911 and hope for a credit card approval so the fire department would show up. Maybe if you couldn't pay for the fire to be put out, you shouldn't have had the house in the first place and would have benefited more from a more privatized living environment. I'm sure KBR knows what to do with my freedom a lot better than I do. Might as well privatize that too. Keep it up, Cheney. All you're doing is emboldening me. Two veterans of the war in Iraq are joining us tonight. We've had a lot of questions about how President Bush and his administration have handled the wars in the Middle East. And now we are featuring two brave Americans with firsthand experience of being there. We're very pleased to welcome First Lieutenant Paul Rykoff and Sergeant Jason Lemieux to talk about their views on the war and what it's like to come home a veteran. Guys, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Jason, Paul.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to divide these questions up. Jason, first you. What led you to becoming a Marine?
Well, my father was a Marine. He served in 1-1 in Vietnam. And growing up, my image was always that Marines were the best citizens in the country. They were the people helping little old ladies across the street. So I joined mostly for the strength of character.
And you joined pre-9/11?
Yes.
Paul, what about you?
I wanted to jump out of airplanes and blow stuff up. That's what I wanted to do. And my grandfather had served in the South Pacific for a few years during World War II. And my father was drafted during Vietnam. And there was a tradition of service in my family. They hated their military experience for the most part, but it built who they were. We came from a patriotic family, and I felt like because I didn't have to serve didn't mean I shouldn't serve. I wanted to give something back to the country that gave me so much.
Jason, how long did you serve in Iraq?
I served a total of 1 year, 9 months, and 14 days in Iraq. And,
over how many deployments?
Three tours.
And Paul, you went?
I was there for about the first year of the war, 2003 to 2004.
Over a single deployment?
Right, one tour, yeah.
What did you feel your responsibilities were when you got there? Because for you, over 3 deployments, Iraq probably changed, responsibilities changed, and the thing had morphed from visit to visit. I'm only guessing, so straighten me out on that.
Oh, you're totally correct on that one. In the first tour, after the invasion, my unit moved down to Karbala, which is a Shiite holy city in the south, where they greeted us as liberators there because they were oppressed under Saddam, and it was very comfortable. It was really safe. We didn't get attacked very much. When I went back the second time, it was to a city in the Sunni Triangle on the border with Syria, and there it was, the difference was indescribable. I mean, in the city of Husayba, it was like human life just lost all meaning. Everybody was there just to protect themselves, whether they were American, Iraqi, or otherwise. The population despised us. There was one time when I got in an argument with an Iraqi border guard, and he was saying, no, Saddam is good. Saddam is better than you. And this was relatively early on. So that was the change was 180 degrees.
And how was it for you?
When we got there in the spring of 2003, we were welcomed as liberators. We felt like we were doing the right thing and that everything was going well. My guys used to say that riding through Baghdad on the back of a deuce-and-a-half truck was like being on a float at Mardi Gras. People came out and brought us tea and kissed us. And over time, things started to change. We couldn't control the looting. We didn't have enough troops on the ground. We didn't control the borders. We didn't understand the culture. We didn't speak Arabic. And we couldn't fix all their problems. The Army didn't issue me a magic wand, so I couldn't fix their drinking water and turn on the lights and do all the other things they were expecting. And over time, they got resentful, they got angry, and things started to change. So by the time we left in 2004 in the spring, the insurgency was full-blown and Americans were getting hit every day.
For you guys actually in Iraq, what was a typical day like?
For us, we were a light infantry unit, so most of our time was spent patrolling, taking 10 to 12, sometimes 25 guys out and walking around looking for trouble. We kind of felt like beat cops on steroids. Right. We looked for insurgents, we looked for criminal elements. We tried to do some reconstruction projects, and we did try to make a better situation for the people on the ground, especially the kids. But the day-to-day, for the most part, was kind of walking around waiting to get your butt shot. Yeah. And I think that's the common thing that seems to unite a lot of our experiences, is this feeling of unknown. And that's why I called my book Chasing Ghosts, because I felt like when we were always getting hit by roadside bombs, snipers, you wanted to punch back. It's what you're trained to do. Sure. But with an insurgency, your enemy melts back into the population. And for the most part, you don't get that chance to punch back. Yeah. So you feel like you're chasing ghosts. And it's a very frustrating, I think, experience for the average soldier or Marine on the ground.
Yeah. What was an event in Iraq that really shook you?
On April 17th of 2004, I was in a 12-hour firefight in Husayba. And my section leader and 2 Marines in my section, 14-man section, were killed. And so the section leader and his number 2 man were both killed, so I got promoted to section leader on that day. And all of a sudden, we're out in the middle of a firefight. I just watched 3 of my friends die, and now I'm in charge of bringing everybody else back home alive. And that was a day that really shook me up pretty good and really solidified all of my beliefs that the war was just not worth the cost.
Paul, what about you?
I think it was early on, and it wasn't something where someone died or someone was wounded. It was a point where the light bulb went off in my head and confirmed that everything was getting screwed up. When we first got to Baghdad in May of 2003, and the city was still kind of popping off and there were explosions, we looked around. We couldn't see another Army unit as far as we could see. And my sergeant turned to me and said, "Hey, sir, where the hell is everybody else?" And I said, "You know, that's a damn good question." It was at that point where I realized there was no humanitarian aid coming. There were no allied nations coming in. We were like Custer, deep in Indian country. And we were going to have to figure this out as we went along. We were going to have to figure out how to communicate. We were going to have to figure out how to arm ourselves, how to get armor for our vehicles, how to get the water systems up and running. It was just that point of disbelief that this could be planned so incredibly poorly, and that despite that poor planning and despite the lack of foresight, we were still going to be there for a long time.
Do you feel that the military failed you on the ground in any way?
I think that one of the big failures has been, we were trained for the invasion. We're trained how to defeat another military. But when it comes to fighting in a civilian population, fighting people who really are civilians, we're not trained how to do that. And we're not trained how to prevent the situation from becoming worse. There's not cultural training. When I went, before the invasion, I think I probably got a few hours of training in Arabic culture. And then it was time to invade. And after the invasion, we created the insurgency unwittingly with our actions. So I think that by just continuing this methodology of killing the enemy, our troops are being failed because they're being taught that war is all about killing, when really that's only one aspect of what's now a cultural war, a war where the media is involved, where families involved, where religion is involved. And so I think it's a big failure that troops are just really being lied to when they're told that their job is merely to go and kill the enemy, because this is an enemy that we're gonna attrit until one day there's no more left. That's not gonna happen.
Are we still the strongest military in the world?
We are. I believe we are, but we won't be forever. And if we keep up at this pace, we won't be for long, because the current operations in Iraq are running our military into the ground. It's an unsustainable pace. And I think what's most important for people to realize right now is that we can either have a superpower or we can have an all-volunteer army. We can't have both. Because right now, there aren't enough people signing up. Recruiting numbers are down. Retention numbers are starting to show signs of weakness, so people are getting out. Captains, sergeants are leaving the military. Our equipment is shot. And we continue to send people back to Iraq for a third and fourth tour. And because Iraq has become such a suck on our resources, we've now had to move people out of places like Korea and put them into Iraq, out of training areas in the United States into Iraq. National Guard and Reserve units that should be here at home are now in Iraq. So I would argue in many ways, not only is our military being run into the ground, but our back door strategically is wide open. So I think one of my biggest criticisms of the president right now is that he's leaving us vulnerable. The Iraq war has made us less safe. And ultimately, we're going to experience kind of a Vietnam hangover on the American military. It's going to take a long time to repair the damage that's been done to our military as a result of this war.
I think we're going to have a whole generation or several thousand young men and women coming back from this thing, you know, three, four deployments with some real problems readjusting. It might become one of America's greatest efforts is cleaning up after this just at home, dealing with when everyone comes home.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a huge hidden cost to this war. And not everybody who comes home loses a limb or suffers a brain injury, but nobody comes home unchanged. And I think what people really don't grasp is the scope. 1.8 million people have been through Iraq and Afghanistan since 9/11. And we talk a lot about the troops on the ground and the recent surge that the president has offered as a plan to try to quell the violence. So we don't talk about the surge of people coming home. And 1 in 3 veterans coming home are going to experience post-traumatic stress disorder. The divorce rate is climbing. We've got homeless Iraq and Afghanistan vets in America right now. And we've got a VA system, which is going to be their first stop, that is grossly underfunded and has been totally neglected under the Bush administration. And as we talk about all the ways that George Bush screwed up the war in Iraq, we're only starting to see the ways he screwed up the back end. And we're a country right now that's busy watching what's going on with Britney Spears or Anna Nicole Smith, and people just aren't tracking about what's happening regarding veterans. There is a cost to war. And I think you're exactly right, Henry. Over time, we're going to see that cost of war is going to start to emerge in our local communities everywhere around the country.
Do you think there is at all a concerted effort to not exactly suppress information, but to only show certain aspects of the war in that Americans are not allowed to see some available footage that would be very jarring and very telling about our conflict in Iraq?
Yeah, I think that part of it is they don't really want to offend people. I mean, I saw a lot of horrible things that I wouldn't want anybody else to see, but I think that the American people can't make informed decisions if they don't really get the reality. And when they get the video game version, it's a lot easier to send people over to fight and die and not see what it's really like, to really understand the gravity of the situation. So yeah, I think that the media is really shorting the American public in that respect.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that there is definitely a concerted effort on the part of the media to self-censor. I think that there are a lot of newspapers and television stations that feel that showing a dead American soldier is going to undermine the war effort, that they may get attacked on their patriotism. It may affect their advertising dollars. Budweiser may not want to sponsor CNN anymore if they show a Marine getting his leg blown off. So I think they have an absolute obligation to show the true reality, the carnage of war. But ask yourself when the last time you saw a dead American was. Have you ever seen a dead American in American media? Probably not. I don't know of any examples of when they've actually shown American troops dead in the mainstream media. The international media has done a much better job and a much more objective job of covering the media. But I think that there has been a consistent, concerted effort to shield the American public from the true American costs of this war, and it's been to our detriment, without a doubt.
And just seeing the Australian footage of something, or when you go, even watching BBC World News, like this austere reportage, you're like, whoa, are we talking about the same conflict? Yeah. Jason, what do you think the impact would be if, here are two very articulate guys, you and Paul, telling the truth of what you know. What if there was like 10,000 of you guys speaking up, even like locally at Knights of Columbus halls, or a sports bar on a Saturday night, or a university? Do you think that could impact how the general public feels and knows about this conflict?
Yes, I think it would, and I think it would remove this connection between the war and the troops that still exists for a lot of people, where you can't support the troops without supporting the war. And I think if people would see more veterans coming out and speaking out that, hey, you know, I went over there and I really don't think I helped anything, then they would see that you don't have to mindlessly advocate for a war just because troops are actually going to go and sent to it. And if you really want to protect the country, at some point you gotta realize that it's in our best interest to get out. That's why we need to bring the troops home now, really, is because the war is making America less safe. It's hurting us in many more ways than it could ever possibly help.
Paul?
When you get home from Iraq or Afghanistan, your service has just started. You have an obligation to help your fellow veterans, to educate people, even if it's just sitting down in a bar and talking about what you think Americans should know, or writing a book, or talking with your buddies, or taking care of a buddy who might have gone through a divorce. I mean, we have an obligation as veterans, as Americans, to try to correct the course that is off right now. And I think that I'm inspired every day by these guys and girls who come home and continue a different kind of fight, no matter what it is. And you can't oppose the policy without opposing the people. And I think guys like us, you know, have an obligation to stand up and explain that to people. Because you're anti-war does not mean you're anti-troop. And we got to push back when the administration tries to reconnect the two and say you can't support Joe Snuffy in Baghdad if you don't support my surge in Baghdad. That's just ridiculous, and I would argue it's really dangerous. And it's one of the more insidious things that the Bush administration and President Bush have done over and over again, is to connect those two in a very dangerous way.
Well, I'm so glad both of you guys have the backbone to stand up and say this stuff. It might be the most patriotic thing you'll ever do, you know, stand up in the face of this and say what you all are saying. I can't thank you enough for doing it. Jason Lemieux, Paul Rieckhoff, your courage, your honesty, your bravery, the fact that you came down here today to talk all about it, I cannot thank you enough. A nation thanks you. This crew thanks you. Sir?
Thank you for having me on.
Sure.
Thank you, brother.
Sir.
Appreciate it, man.
All right.
And bring peace and democracy to the Middle East. Yet for another group, it is the best thing that could ever happen. You might wonder who could possibly be happy about a situation with such devastating consequences. I don't. The corporations that provide services to the military are making more money in this time than ever before. Troop withdrawal, you shouldn't have had the house in the first place and would have benefited more from a more privatized living environment. I'm sure KBR knows what to do with my freedom a lot better than I do. Might as well privatize that too. Keep it up, Cheney. All you're doing is emboldening me. To merely being the small fish underneath the chin of the no-bid deal corporate shark. It's working great in Iraq. Why not bring that overpriced roadshow here to America and treat the citizens to a little of that privatized efficiency? Privatize water supplies to always ensure that the right people will never be thirsty. Privatize education, and then only the people who can really benefit from it will get the information they need from the best teachers available and be able to make the best choices for all the rest. Privatize the military, turn the entire shooting match into a mercenary outfit that stabilizes the unstable and neutralizes any motherfucker with a problem or a question. Imagine having to call 1-800-911 and hope for a credit card approval so the fire department would show up. Maybe if you couldn't pay for the fire to be put out, it's not in their interest. Perhaps corporations like the Halliburton subsidiary Kellogg Brown & Root, otherwise known as KBR, are using the green zone in Iraq as a prototype for how they would like to eventually privatize and control America. Think about it. In Iraq, if KBR and other corporations pulled out, the military would be in great danger. A testament to how the greatest fighting force in the world has been reconfigured, crippled, I say,